the House of Reps only recently, in fact, I think they will talk about it next week when they resume, when they continue their sitting. They say they've gone round to see how the executive arm of government is implementing the 2012 budget, because some of them argue, how could you come and talk about your presentation or proposal for 2013, whereas you're supposed to predicate it on what you've done before? So for some of them, it just doesn't add up, and they haven't even seen even a 50% implementation of the 2012 budget, and then you talk about 2013. So at the end of the day, even if you've got the best of plans, they don't seem to see it.
Let me throw a question back to you. Did you hear this, or were you told? No, you're absolutely right. It's tragic. It's tragic. But, you know, I think to some extent also, okay, it's good to realize that you have made a mistake or you have failed in certain respects, and you're making attempts to rectify these mistakes. I think this is what the National Assembly is trying to do. Indeed, it is probably inappropriate also for them to physically, you know, do this once in a year. It should be a constant monitoring process. Maybe they should have a legislative budget office which is constantly monitoring and reporting back, unless they might say, because of the Nigerian factor, if we delegate that responsibility, they could be settled. They can come and give us a wrong report again. That's a possibility, but you know, but that's an indictment on our own character. But I think it's quite clear that the level of wastage, if what the legislators have seen is actually accurate, and a lot of Nigerians who don't even know or have access to these things could tell you off the cuff that they are very, very accurate. But I don't see how again, apart from that throwing up the issues of corruption and all that type of thing, I still think that it's misguided to expect our capital budget performance to drastically or significantly improve our lifestyle, our welfare, even if it is appropriately spent. Because the example I gave you before, $40 billion to $100 billion required for power alone. So if we're talking of 1.5 trillion naira, which is just about 7 billion or $8 billion or thereabouts, you know, that's nothing. We shouldn't be excited about that. What we should be excited about is how are you going to transform the economy by bringing interest rate down to 4 or 5%, so everybody can go for it. You know,
that
so
will in the private sector.
We're also, yeah, exactly. We also seem to be glossing over the role of the private sector here, because the federal government knows it cannot do everything by itself. Even if we add, say, the revenue that you think could have been added in terms of what customs generates and what the Federal Land Revenue Service, it still would not be sufficient to address power alone.
Absolutely.
So the question will be, are we also not glossing over the role of foreign investors here? Because the federal government knows that it cannot do it by itself, and so far has sought to privatize the power sector. Do you think that that's a wise move?
Let's look at it this way. You provide schools, whether they are good or bad, even if they are good, and the children come out of the schools and they don't find jobs. Okay? Right. You ask for foreign investment, you ask for private sector investments and things like that, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Okay? They ask for foreign direct investment. Most of what is coming to this country is coming into the securities market. That is the federal, because they find a willing government that is rich enough to give its money out and borrow it back, and at 12% or thereabouts. They can't get, you know, that kind. I mean, these people are not charities or whatever. They're looking for the highest yields. You know, they can't get that kind of money by placing their money in Europe. Okay? But they have a federal government of Nigeria that is prepared to say, even though we have enough money, we still want to borrow, okay? Because that's the style. We want to borrow. And then they come and, you know, bring this money in, and it's volatile cash. It's a volatile cash flow, because the moment they think anything is wrong, just like what happened last time. So we shouldn't be too excited when we hear foreign direct. If you read the news all the time, or you know that. You know, there's huge foreign direct investment, and the DMO offers this month are oversubscribed, and, you know, many times over. Because who doesn't like a good thing? Where would you get risk-free government borrowing, and risk-free not of a government that is in distress or whatever, but a buoyant country with abundant resources and materials and everything like that, borrowing at 12%, especially money that it doesn't need. How can you ever grow? So to take your point, you cannot gloss over the private sector, but the reality, of course, now is that the government does not even seem to realize that there is something like the requirement for an enabling environment, because these are hinged not on the pillars that they have said in the thing, but on the pillars of good monetary policy management, you know, low interest rates and also low level of inflation that would protect your salary. So if you're getting, for example, 100,000 naira this year, you can be sure that in 5 years' time, if even your salary has not improved, you could still command the same purchasing power that you earned with 100,000 naira. But with the rate of inflation at a constant increase of 10% annually, it means that your boss must be giving you another 10% annually increase. Not many people get 10% increases in Nigeria for you to remain on the same spot. So you cannot remain on the same spot. The greatest driver of poverty in the country is inflation. It's a silent plague of sorts.
Okay, Mr. Boyo, I know we're almost out of time.
We are actually.
Okay, but just one last question. If you're asked to advise the central bank as regards the monetary policy framework, what would you tell them?
Very simple. Dismantle the monopoly of the CBN on the foreign exchange market, and the economy would be immediately transformed. Within 6 months, you'll see a transformation. Not the kind of transformation that they are talking about, which they have been talking about for 15 years or more. Anyhow, you know, and I guarantee you, within 6 months. But they're afraid to do it because why? It will wipe out the excess funds that are available for corruption. And the banks also that are making so much money for doing it. For example, the chairman of Access Bank boasted in the papers 2 days ago that Nigerian banks, the profits of Nigerian banks alone would be greater than 10% of all banks in Europe because they have a country of mughals where, you know, and that's very tragic and that's unfortunate.
But that's a
what are we getting in return for all these huge profits that the banks are making?
Which is what should be the central focus, actually, because at the end of the day, what will be the essence if they know what they're doing and we don't see the benefits?
Can I just say that one thing that is obvious here is the obvious omission of subsidy. That has been hidden somewhere in the 10.8 something. Maybe they intend to make it a first-line charge, but even if they do so, why don't they make it transparently clear that this is it?